Yellow Hybrid was getting hyped up as probably the best deck in BT7 format. Luckily for us, Bandai has graced us with the Banhammer and eliminated Mega Digimon Fusion from the meta, therefore disabling the Susanamon turbo builds that the Japanese Yellow Hybrid decks were kind of leaning towards the end of their BT7 format and onwards. So us here in the English meta, we're going to have to get a little bit creative with our Yellow Hybrid decks. There are some pretty good top ends that we can go for. As with any yellow deck, there is a lot of variability in your top end, what you want to do with your bosses, but the yellow hybrid engine itself is so powerful and versatile that it's going to allow you to take the deck in any direction you want, really, and you'll probably still be competitive. But I think there are two main versions that we are going to see emerge, and we're going to go over those in this video, of course. So for those of you who don't know what Yellow Hybrid is, it's essentially a 4, 8, 12, 16 card package that is all coming out in BT7. It's a hybrid package centered around Zoe and Jet Sylphimon are probably the two strongest cards in the engine. But it's essentially something that allows you to consistently search and recover for very cheap. So the deck strengths are going to be the TK and Zoe Tamers. TK, we all know what that does. Zoe, for you, those of you who don't know, has a very similar effect. You play it for 3 memory, look at your security, and you can add 1 hybrid yellow Digimon to your hand and then recover 1. So this essentially lets you search, I believe it's 4, 8, 12 targets in your deck. So the Kazemon, Zephyrmon, and the Jet Sylphimons, which you all max out on. So Zoe has a few targets. TK, of course, can add any yellow card. Well, it can add any card in your security, but you only recover if you add a yellow card. Because of the consistency that these two cards allow, the yellow deck has the ability to play an off-color base engine. The most popular one we're going to be seeing is purple because it gives you access to Schwarzlersatz, I believe it is. German for Black Theorem, for whoever cares about that. Nice little translation. Also, the thing about this deck, and for those of you who played in Shine Greymon meta back in set 1.5, it has what I like to call inevitability. So if you're not familiar with this term, it's essentially a deck that no matter what, eventually at some point in the game, they will get off what they're trying to do, and it's going to be powerful enough to win the game. So an example of a deck that has inevitability in this current format, I would say, is something like Three Musketeers. So Three Musketeers, if you let them go to late game, at some point, they're just going to be able to overwhelm you with Bielstar Mons that play incredibly cheaply costed options with extremely powerful effects. So, late game, they're going to just drop Bielstar for 3, 2, sometimes even 0 memory, and then, cast free Nailbones, free Gidwall Shormer, free Trump Sword, like whatever. Like, we've all been on the receiving end of a late game through Musketeers, and it feels like if you don't beat that deck within like the first 6 or 7 turns, they're going to be able to cycle through their deck enough for them to be able to execute that game plan. Shine Greymon in set 1.5 was very much the same. If you didn't beat them before they got their kindergarten setup, aka like their full back row of tamers, like the TKs and Karis, then you would pass over to them, 6 or 7 memory each turn because of the value of the tamers, and then they would be able to shine, wipe your board, next turn shine, wipe your board, and then they would eventually just win the game just through sheer attrition. And it felt like there wasn't really much you could do if you let them get to that point. This deck is very similar in that aspect, and it makes sense why we are actually seeing Shine Greymon come back as a boss monster for this deck, because it very much does what Shine wanted to do back then, but in a more modern sense. This is definitely a modern Digimon deck, especially with the hybrid stuff, so we're going to be able to see some real bullshit feeling stuff, but we're all used to it at this point, right? It is a yellow deck. Of course, weaknesses, slow to set up board. It is a tamer-centric deck. Again, going back to the 1.5 Shine comparison. Shine back then had to take several turns to set up their tamers in order to eventually get off the big bomb with their Shine Greymon effect. We're going to see the same thing with this version of the deck. They do have to set up Zoes and TKs and TK and Karis, the dual tamer. But the difference now is that setting up those tamers can then be turned into attacks via the hybrid cards. So it's a lot more powerful, and you lose a lot less tempo by having to check out these tamers. So it is a much better engine overall. The weaknesses of the deck are still the same, in the sense that you are weak to getting OTK'd. So the problem with Shine in 1.5 and the way people kind of learn to play around that deck is to leave them at 4 memory, or 4 security, I mean. That way you can leave their cardies off and then OTK them from 4 memory. We're going to be seeing a very similar strategy be employed in this meta, I feel like, especially with the TK and Kari dual tamer, which activates if they have less security than you. So if your opponent is playing yellow hybrids, you want to make sure that you guys are on even security, or maybe even just try not to attack them until you can set up your 5 to 6 attack turn and then just go all in and rush them for game. It's a very, very viable strategy. Of course, you can get punished by Wyvern's Breath or Schwartz. That's just the name of the game, though. Name of the game. Of course, we did lose the Mega Digimon Fusion into Susanamon finisher play, or even just like high tempo value play. You can still run Susanamon in this deck. Many people still do. I think it's still a perfectly fine strategy to do so, but I think we're going to see less of it. You can, in theory, run win rate 60%, but that's still going to make your Susanamon cost 5. And even without that, playing Susana for 7 is still very possible in this deck. You can do TK plus 2 dual tamers, or TK plus a dual tamer plus a blinding ray. So you can get to 7 memory in this deck. It's not impossible, but obviously the option of spitting out Susanamon for 1 over a tamer is gone. And finally, just high tamer count can always just clog your hand, and if you're running the purple base option, then that can also get a little cloggy. So you can run into some brick scenarios, but that's nothing that the deck can't overcome. But it is technically a weakness of the deck. All right. Key cards of the deck, like I said before, talking about the hybrid engine, we of course have Zoe. So you can search your stack for 1 hybrid or 10 warriors and its traits, reveal it, and then add it to your hand. We don't play any 10 warriors because the 10 warriors card sucks. Ancient Kazemon don't play it. We do of course play hybrids, which would be your Kazemon, Zephyrmon, and Jet Sylphimon. And the inheritable of Zoe is on your opponent's turn, all your security Digimon get plus 3000 DP. Nothing to write home about, but it does come up, so it's not an unwelcome inheritable. Kazemon is just a Lobomon clone, your very basic standard vanilla hybrid card, but you have to play it, so you play 4. Zephyrmon, you can Digivolve it on top of a yellow tamer for 2 memory, so notice its regular Digivolution cost is either over level 3 for 3 memory, or over level 4 for 1 memory, or over a tamer for 2 memory, so it has 3 Digivolution costs essentially. And then when Digivolving, if you have a hybrid in your traits or Zoe in your cards, all your security Digimon get plus 3000 DP. So you essentially double up on the Zoe inheritable in this case. So you can have 1 turn where your security Digimon get plus 6000 DP. So turning your Kazemon, for example, 5000 DP into an 11000 DP in security can really dissuade your opponent from attacking for that turn. So I think it's a fair effect. It's not super powerful by any means, but it is something that is going to come up in battles. And last but certainly not least, the card that everyone says is the most broken card in BT7, and I am inclined to agree, is of course Jet Sylphimon. If it wasn't for Jet Sylphimon, then I think this deck would be a lot weaker than we are currently seeing. Essentially, what this card does, if you don't know, is that you can Digivolve it on a stack that has a tamer in its inheritables for 1 memory, and whenever you Digivolve on top of a hybrid, or if you have hybrid in your traits, recovery plus 1. So you can essentially get a recovery plus 1 for 1 memory. That is what makes this card incredibly insane. It's a very undervalued cost for a recovery plus 1. So let's say our standard memory cost for a recovery is 6 memory, just based on the effect of Holy Wave, right? So Holy Wave is recover 1 for 6 memory. This is recover 1 for 1 memory. Technically speaking, if you're counting your whole stack, you probably did pay 6 memory in total, but because it's broken up into smaller costs over the course of several turns, it's a lot easier to swallow. It's a much more tempo-outable effect. That was kind of a mouthful, but yes, essentially you get to cycle your hand, and instead of just taking the raw -1 and then having to pay the full 6 memory all at once from Holy Wave, you can play Jet Sylphiumon for 1, still have it be your turn, and get the same effect. Yes, over the course of the game, you probably played 6 memory for that stack, but it doesn't matter because this is a much easier way to get that effect off. Very, very, very strong card. All right, so then outside of that hybrid engine, you have a lot of ways to go with the deck. This only takes up 16 slots, so you still have 34 other cards left in your deck to mess around with. And where you're gonna have, like, I think the most variance is gonna be in your boss monsters. So I think the one that people are looking at the most right now is gonna be Shine Greymon, just because it has a lot of fans. We still have a lot of fans from back when Shine Greymon was the best deck in 1.5. People's shines have been collecting dust in their binders, and I'm sure they're itching to get this card back out. It is going to be very good, of course, for you. Those of you who didn't feel the pain of Shine Greymon. The effect is that when digivolving, you suspend all your tamers, and then for each tamer you suspended, you minus 4,000 DP on one of your opponent's Digimon, and you can split that however you want to. So let's say you have 4 tamers out, you digivolve into Shine, you can do 4, 8, 12, minus 6,000 DP, and you can split that like on a rookie, so then you still have 12,000 DP, and then you can kill one of their level 6s, or you can split it into 8,000, 8,000, and kill 2 level 5s. Very versatile effect, very powerful removal, minus DP. There isn't a lot of things that get around that except for, I guess, Machine Dramon, or I think there's a green level 6 that can't be DP reduced, but that card sucks. So, Shine Greymon, we're going to be seeing a lot of this card. Be prepared for it. It is a late game bomb. And then the other level 6 boss that saw a lot of play in Japan, but I think we're probably going to be seeing less so of it, is going to be Dynasmon. So Dynasmon, when digivolving, you can trash a top card of your security, look at the top 6 cards of your deck, add 2 level 6 or lower Digimon, and the rest go into the trash. And then the all turns effect, which is pretty powerful, is whenever a card is removed from your security, if you have 3 or less security, you recover 1. So this is essentially kind of lets you stall, lets you recover 1 on your opponent's turn when they're trying to attack your face. It has really good synergy with TK and Zoe, since those cards technically remove from your security. So you can remove a card from your security, add a card back to your security with TK and Zoe's own effect, and then Dynasmon still reads that as you removed a card from your security, so then you can recover 1 on top of that. So you essentially turn your TK and your Zoe into recovery +1 cards for 4 and 3 memory respectively, which is very, very powerful, of course, because as we said before, kind of the standard memory cost for a recovery +1 is 6 if you're just like hard playing a card like that. So this is, again, a way to get some undercosted recovery going into your deck. And the when digivolving effect of trashing cards and adding 2 to your hand in the past allow you to fuel your Susanomon play, since you need 10 hybrids or tamers in your trash in order to do the hybrid warp effect. So Dynasmon would allow you to very easily fill your trash and meet that requirement. However, since we're going to be seeing no MDFs and substantially less Susanomon builds, I think Dynasmon loses value in that sense. You can still play it as a secondary boss, and I think it still has a lot of value, just if only because of the synergy with TK and Zoe, and also just the search effect in general is like a fairly decent effect. Like, there's no reason to hate on this card at all whatsoever. I think it's still fine. We're still going to be seeing it. But I think a card that a lot of people are sleeping on, that I think we should be taking into consideration, is Mastemon, for several reasons. Number one, of course, the trash one, and then play a purple or yellow Digimon card from your trash has always been a powerful effect. This card still sees play. People are still loving this card. Even to this day, I've tried to make it work myself. Mastemon, very strong card, high value card. But in this deck in particular, I think it has a lot of even higher value because you're running the purple base anyways, right? So you can recycle Gazimons or Tapirmons, I guess, if you're playing those. You can also recycle Kazimon or Zephyrmon and then digivolve a Jet Sylphie on top of those, get your recovery off, very strong. It's a purple card, so then it gives you access to Zwart Defeat, which I think is going to be a very, very, very high value card next format. It's going to be one of your only ways of interacting with your opponent's tamers and being able to wipe them off the board outside of Lucimon Chaos mode. So Mastemon, going to be a very high value card. It lets you swing for a lot of damage, especially if you're running Rise Greymon or Bushi Agumon. We'll get into a build that does that kind of thing as well. So just keep this card in mind. I'm going to be a big fan of this card moving forward. I think this is going to be the way I'm going to take the deck, the Mastemon version. I think most people are going to go for the Shine version, and I'm sure there's going to be some people still trying to do like a Dynasmon win rate 60% turbo version of the deck. Maybe throw in some purple Mimis to make win rate cost less, something like we're seeing in Titanmon decks right now. Like I said, a lot of ways to take the deck. So I did kind of briefly mention Susanomon win rate, and I kind of want to get a little bit more into that on the topic of, is Susanomon still a worthwhile card to include in your yellow hybrid deck? So let's look at some of the pros and cons of the card. Pro, of course, you can recycle your deck. That has always been one of the big pros of Susanomon. Like, not just like the warp effect, but the recycle effect is also very strong. Because your core engine is only 16 cards, right? You're only running 4 Jet Sylphies, 4 Kazemons, and 4 Zephyrmons. And you don't really play any level 4s outside of that, and you don't really play any level 5s outside of that. So being able to put those back in your deck and like make use of them once again is going to be a very strong effect. Even if they do go to the bottom of your deck, you'll get down there eventually. Like, playing this deck, it's fine. Like, this deck has a long lifespan. It can grind out until like those later parts of the game where you're going to be at the bottom of your deck. Of course, you can always like bring it out over a Tamer. That's always still a good effect. The when Digivolving, destroy one of your opponent's Digimon, still a good effect. You can Digivolve this on top of your spent level 6. By spent level 6, I mean something like Shine Greymon, which doesn't do anything after its initial Digivolution. It just kind of turns into a vanilla. Same thing with Mastemon, doesn't really do anything after its initial Digivolution. Kind of a vanilla. Dynasmon has kind of an ongoing continuous effect, so Digivolving over that one can feel bad. But, you know, the option is still there in case you need to remove something. And, of course, if you do Digivolve into Susanomon and pass turn, it is a huge threat. Your opponent is going to want to remove it, or they're going to be on the receiving end of a security attack +2, 3 checks. So it is a high pressure card. Win rate 60%, should you choose to play it. It has some pros over MDF in the sense that you don't have to play white Tamers in order to activate it. You just have to have any Tamer on the board. So obviously you're playing a shitload of Tamers in this deck, so that's not really a condition. However, win rate itself costs 2 memory, and it only reduces costs by 4. So essentially you're going to be playing 5 for Susanomon anyways, right? Because 7 minus 3, or 7 minus 4 is 3, and then win rate costs 2, so that's 5 memory. So it's not the 1 memory that we were shitting out Susanomons for with the MDF, but it is feasible. You could have a TK plus an active TK and Kari dual tamer that gives you 5 memory. TK plus blinding ray, that'll get you to 5 memory. Or even just playing Susanomon hard for 7 is still possible. You can do a TK plus 2 dual tamers, TK plus a dual tamer plus a blinding ray. So it's not unfeasible. I think the card still can be played, and you can still use its effect and still be able to attack on 1 turn. Obviously not as fast as the 1 memory MDF play, but you can still get there. So consider it. People are still going to be trying to run it. I know Susanomon is like a fan favorite card for lore reasons or something. So yeah, just keep it in mind. Don't be like shocked if someone like just drops Susanomon on you out of nowhere, even without MDF. It's still going to be happening. All right, and I also alluded to the purple package. So why purple? Well, number 1, TK and Zoe, the consistency of being able to add those other hybrid cards to your hand from your security lets you kind of forego having to get the extra consistency from your eggs. However, the purple eggs actually do give you consistency. Why? Because you can run Demi-Marimon into Piermon, which will give you some nice cycle and fuel your trash should you be choosing to play Susanomon or Mastemon. You get access to Gazimon. Yellow doesn't have its own in-color memory blocker yet. I think they're getting one, but I'm not sure. But obviously Gazimon is around, so that's a good card. If you run Mastemon, then Mastemon can get back purple level 3s, so that can boost your Mastemon effectiveness. You know, being able to get back a Gazimon can always be a strong play. Also, you don't necessarily have to run Demi-Meramon. Xiaomon Egg is also a good option. If Xiaomon Egg Inheritable is if you have 10 or more cards in your trash, you gain Retaliation. So you can turn your Rickies into Suicide Bomber removals. Always really strong. And of course, the main reason to play Purple Engine is for this Schwarz Lersatz card. I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation. But what the card says is that for each Digimon with hybrid in its traits and each tamer you have in play, delete one of your opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon. This is an insane board wipe card. Insane board wipe card. So you combo this ability to board wipe with Shine Greymon's ability to board wipe. It's going to be very hard for your opponent to keep Digimon on the board. This is going to be kind of like almost a pseudo security control type of deck with the amount of removal and just recovery that this deck has. So I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot of security control players move to this deck, since security control itself in its current state is not going to be as viable in BT7. So we're going to be saying this deck being played in its stead and kind of filling that same niche of recovery and removal and pressure. This deck actually has some actual offensive pressure, which security control has never really had. Only con to running purple base really is that your hands can get clunky, but luckily that's not necessarily a problem, because again, you get hand cycling, we have TK Instant Zoes, like there's lots of ways to get around clunky hands in this deck, and you can always just like bide your time and play around them or play out of them. This is a late game deck after all. Again, going back to that Shine Greymon example, sometimes you would beat their face into one security, and then all of a sudden they just drop one Shine, and it's over for you. You can't come back from that first Shine, so you have to kill them in one go. Alright, so let's get into some example builds. These are going to be just two decks that I kind of played around with a little bit. I'm going to show you guys like some different options. These aren't like hard and fast decks. These are just like examples of different engines, how they fit together, how you can run them together, and like some card choices that you can make. So I'm going to start off with just a plain single color Shine Greymon list. All right, nothing crazy, nothing too spicy. All right, so we're just gonna go with 4 Upas, 4 Salas, 4 Bushis. Why 4 Bushis? I'll explain why in a second. We have our hybrid package, so of course we have Kazemon and Zephyrmon and Jet Sylphimon at 4s, you have to. Then we have Rise Greymon, which when digivolving allows you to play a tamer from your hand for free. You don't get its on-play effect, but we don't really care because we kind of just want it to fuel our Shine Greymon. Also, the inheritable of Rise Greymon is if you have 3 or more yellow security or yellow tamers in play, you get security attack +1. That gives you a lot more pressure in this deck. Lets your Shine Greymon hit for security attack +1, so 2 checks, and it itself has a DP boost. Let's see, +1000 DP for each tamer you have in play, so Shine Greymon can get pretty big, and then attack with security +1. Like makes it a pretty powerful offensive threat. And then we have Mastodon as a secondary boss. You could also run Dynasmon. Some people play Seraphimon just for the extra recovery. There's a lot of different options for your secondary boss. But the reason I want to highlight Mastodon in this particular deck list is that you can put Mastodon on top of Rise Greymon, get the security attack +1, and then have Mastodon bring back a Bushi Agumon. So that's essentially, for 1 card, you suddenly get 4 security checks worth of pressure. Alright, so Mastodon effect trashes the security. Mastodon with Rise Greymon Inheritable is security attack +1, so that could be 2 checks. So that's 3 checks total, 3 security gone. And then Bushi Agumon Rush effect for the 4th check, right? So that's a very high value, high tempo, aggressive play that you can make in combination with these cards. Just like a kind of a package to keep in mind if you want to be a little bit more aggressive with your yellow hybrid deck. I do want to show off the ability to play Susanomon in this deck, especially with the Blinding Ray and Reinforcement Reboost. It is limited to 1, but it is still a very good card that you do want to be playing. So again, Susanomon costs 7, so we can do TK plus TK and Kari plus Blinding Ray. That'll get you to 7, or TK and 2 duels will also get you to 7, so that you can play Susanomon and attack with it on the same turn. 4 Wyvern's Breath just for the removal, and yep, that's pretty much the build. Like I said, very standard, plain Jane Shine Greymon deck list, nothing too crazy. I think if you want to play around with this, you can definitely take this out for a purple base. Mastamon can be any other level 6 you want, or you can just forgo them entirely. Susanomons could even be Valder arms, perhaps. So you have options. You have options. But the one that I'm most excited about is this Mastamon list. So here I'm going to show you guys the purple base. So it's 4 Demimeras. I'm going to run 3 Tapirmons and 3 Gazimons. You can run 4 Gazi, 2 Tapir, or I've seen people run Elecmon instead of Tapirmon just for some extra removal options. You can run Xiaomon instead of Darimeron, of course, if you want the extra removal options. There's a lot of play within these slots that you can do. Pokemon, always a good card in hybrid decks. You don't need it as much in yellow hybrids just because you have so much consistency from TK and Zoe, but of course Pokemon is always going to be a welcome effect just for the search top 5 and also the reduced cost when your Tamer Digivolve. I think Pokemon is a huge threat and target for removal as well, so you can kind of magnet your opponent's removal to Pokemon and kind of save your other cards. It essentially has kind of like a taunt effect, you could say. Of course, here we have our hybrid package. So Kazemon, Zephyrmon, Jet Sylphie. And this here, I chose to run red Rise Greymon over yellow Rise Greymon. Excuse me. Just to sort of highlight a different card. And also, I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that the Digiburst does allow you to fuel your trash for a Mastamon effect. So that's why we've always seen Rise Greymons in Mastamon decks, is for that reason. However, it is a little bit slower than Yellow Rise Greymon because it's a Digiburst effect. So, for example, Yellow Rise Greymon, if you're at less than 3 security, you can Digivolve and still get your free Tamer out. However, with Red Rise Greymon, you can't do that since it's a Digiburst effect, so you have to have the 3 memory to Digivolve into it, and then have it still be your turn in order to use the Digiburst. So, something to keep in mind. Again, we have the 4 Mastamon here, and then I'm comboing that with 4 Zwart Defeat. So with the amount of recovery that you have in this deck, the odds of you getting a Zwart Defeat in your security goes up by a lot. And we also have the purple level 6 so that we can Digivolve over into the Zwart Defeat and get the Tamer Deletion effect off, which I think is going to be a very, very, very high value effect in this format. People are selling their Zwart Defeats off right now, I think because they think Security Control has lost value as a deck moving into the next format. But I think that Zwart Defeat is going to have other applications within the format, especially in a deck like this, which makes use of Mastamon and being able to trash and delete your opponent's Tamers. Here we have the 4 Schwartz, Lursats, whatever. You can run 4 no problem. Like, since you're running the purple eggs, they're always going to be on. 1 Reinforce, of course, you have to run it. It's a broken card. And then we have our 16 Tamers. So this is just to highlight sort of what you can do with Mastamon as your main boss and being able to slot in Zwart Defeats to counter or interact more with other opposing hybrid decks. Of course, you could maybe even run less Mastamons, maybe cut down on Zwart Defeats. Maybe you can run a Mastamon and Shine Greymon hybrid where you run, 2 Mastamon, 2 Zwart Defeats, similar to the Lord Knight Mastamon decks from BT7, and then you still have room for a couple Susanomons or Valder arms or something like that. Like I said, a lot of ways that you can take the top end of this deck and the bottom end of this deck, because really the only thing that matters are those 16 hybrid yellow cards. That the engine is so powerful that you can do so much with it the world is your oyster when it comes to yellow hybrid, basically. So these are just my 2 example decks, 2 ways to think about building the deck if you hadn't thought of it to build it this way before. Bring attention to some unique cards or card interactions. Hopefully you guys have taken some inspiration from this video, and I look forward to seeing everyone's yellow hybrid build in the very near future. Alright, GG's guys.